Why can't we be friends? 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 Hello!
I can tell you why we can't be friends, Jason. Because you've got 60%. What's the word?
Connection?
No.
Oh, 60% bigger head on the screen because of the different camera I've had to go with this week.
60% refined uranium. That's why we can't be friends.
Yes, of course. Hello! Welcome to episode number 255 of the VK Bros with Jason and Alex on Channel. And if you can't tell from the beginning of the show, one of the key subjects we will be discussing today is the Israel v. Iran potential nuclear war incoming. As well as, in a similar vein, we've got some updates from the New South Wales Jew van hoax, which is a story that just continues to get wilder and wilder.
It's crazy, dude.
How are you going this week, Alex, before we start?
I'm good. I had a long lunch yesterday with a listener of the show, so shout out to Dave. That was a good time.
What's up, Dave?
We talked about a lot of the topics that we talk about on here. He had some issues with the way that I deliver some of the messages.
Did you say you talked about the toppings?
We did talk toppings.
Yeah,
yes, obviously.
It's Dave joke. Shout out to Dave.
And it was funny because the conversation that we had about delivery and something.
I had to move this camera. Sorry, Mike. for video viewers, I got to apologise. I've got this weird camera issue with my laptop that, for some reason, it's like having kids. For some reason, if I just try to use my laptop camera, which is normally the more wide angle, less melon head view, every now and then it just decides to freeze and just doesn't work. But I've got a secondary camera, which is this one I'm using right now, that usually if I plug this one in, the other camera starts acting right. Like, it's so weird, but it won't act right today. So, unfortunately, my head's way bigger than it normally is on a standard episode.
And I'm way smaller.
Yeah.
Jason and I did speak about this before the show started, so I won't go too deep into it. But essentially it was like, he essentially asked me, if the evidence changed, would I change my mind? And I said yes. And he's like, that some people just aren't going to receive the information that you have. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And that's fine too. What's not fine, and something that I really struggle to deal with, is when the evidence is provided and you just say no to that evidence, that I don't cop. So you can't just say, I feel a different thing and I'm right. Well, no, because here's the evidence.
I just want to precursor this because that's a really important statement, because I guarantee you right now there will be some things said on this show today which will not feel right to a lot of you listening out there at home. There will be some evidence provided to you to support the statements that are made on the show which will not feel right to you, but you do need to be willing to open your mind, and when you see new information that you had not yet before seen, potentially change the way you think about things.
Yes. Well, what I found super interesting is after I had lunch, I went and met with another friend, and we were debating the whether you should buy a property debate, something that we've spoken about on the show before. And we literally did a whiteboard session and wrote down the raw numbers.
Right.
And using my friend's data, and we used some assistance to try and forecast what the likely price of property was. The raw data, my strategy was clearly ahead, like by a mile. And he looked at it and he's like, no. Then he asked ChatGPT the question, and ChatGPT actually did a great job. It essentially did all the same breakdown that we did, and gave me the exact same thing. And he's like, no. And that's the part that really frustrates me, is you can say, I don't like it, and I know that you're right, but I'm going to do something else. That's fine. You're an adult.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But don't lie to yourself, and also don't come to me. Like, you've come to me because you know that I've got an opinion on this thing.
Yeah.
I've done it, right? The property thing I've done before. I've done everything in the investment world. I've done it all. So you've come to me to ask me the question. I've given you an answer, and it's not the answer that you wanted to hear. And instead of listening to it and accepting the data for what it is, you just deny it. You just go, no,
Okay,
you don't rebuke it.
This is so funny to me because, again, this is in line with the theme of the show. And the theme is this. People are going to do things because it's the things that they want to do. And if you're going to do those things, that's totally fine. But do not attempt to justify you doing those things in a way that can be easily disproven. Right? If you're just going to do the thing, okay, we get it. You want to do the thing. We understand you want to do the thing. Go and do the thing. If that's what you want to do, go and do the thing. Totally. But do not justify it by using, whether it's metrics or moral arguments, that once you actually analyze those arguments, they don't stack up. Just do the thing.
Well, let's pivot. Let's move into the content.
Sorry, I'm real head nicked about the size of my head right now.
Head nicked.
It doesn't help that my beard is a little bit longer than standard too. So I think most of the audience is going to already think that I'm choosing sides.
Speaking of large amounts of real estate, it's the real estate of Jason's face on the screen.
That's not a moon. All right, let's get into it. Israel v Iran. So we mentioned on Instagram last weekend. So we recorded last Friday morning, and literally just after we finished recording, we heard that Israel had launched the first preemptive strike missiles towards Iran. So obviously we didn't discuss it on last week's show, but I did put up some initial thoughts on Instagram, which is always a tricky thing to do because... believe it or not, Alex and I don't like just saying things that we feel at the time because oftentimes that is incorrect. And I must admit that I have been a victim of doing this on X this week because there has been a lot of debate surrounding this. It's dominated X all week. And what I found so intriguing is how so many, particularly commentators that lean to the right, that I have typically agreed with on the vast majority of subjects over the last 5 years, all of a sudden lose their minds as soon as Israel is involved in anything. And this is where what we were saying before about, or what I was saying about using certain moral arguments or other arguments to justify a certain action, you're literally watching people in real time tie themselves in knots to try to justify Israel's activities. Now, I'm just going to start out the show by saying this. When I refer to Israel during the show, I'm not referring to Israelis. I'm not referring to the Jews, because that is always the criticism whenever this sort of stuff comes up. What I'm referring to is the government of Israel, headed up by Benjamin Netanyahu, and their activities. Because, as we all know, Alex and I are Australian citizens. Do you think Albo does anything we want him to do? No. So do not apply that to the Israelis. Do not apply that to the Iranians either, right? These are, unfortunately, governments doing things that the majority of their people probably don't actually agree with, whether the propaganda tells you that they agree with it or not.
Sure.
Do you want to start off on this one, Alex?
Well, I want to ask you, why we call it a preemptive strike?
Okay, so this... I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to tell not a personal story, but one of the things I find so interesting about Israel in itself is when Israel's not involved in conflict, what we hear about them constantly is certain things like they've got one of the most advanced militaries on the planet, they've got some of the most advanced military equipment on the planet, and their intelligence agency, the Mossad, is the greatest intelligence agency on the planet also. And everyone gives them their props for that. And one of the stories we've covered many times over the years is the Epstein story. And the majority of people think that Epstein essentially was a Mossad agent working to get compromise on high-ranking officials in the American government so that the Mossad could control what those politicians do, rich people do, etc., etc. And now, some of the people that are probably on that list seem to be heavily supporting what Israel's doing at the moment. But what you said was like, to start this off, is so interesting because when the attacks first happened, I literally saw in real time on X the supporters of Israel with the same tagline you hear every single time they do something. Israel has the right to defend itself. Yeah. Israel has the right to defend themselves. It is the equivalent of me going next door, punching my neighbour's mother in the face, walking back home, having her son come over and attack me and say, I'm just defending myself. No, I punched first. But here's the thing. And that
was a preemptive strike.
Yeah, I'm gonna start out with probably the biggest bombshell. Not even actually, no, it's not. I've got something else I'm going to say later, which is even bigger. But here's the biggest thing: when all this stuff first happened, and the narrative immediately was, number one, Israel has the right to defend itself, and number two, the Iranian regime can never have a nuclear weapon. My bullshit detectors blared hardcore, and I said on one of Konstantin Kissin's posts, who is a man that I have great respect for, who I normally agree with on most things as a rational actor and a rational analyst of these sorts of conflicts, I posted on one of his, this is weapons of mass destruction all over again, and you're falling for it.
Yep.
And I had a lot of support for that statement. I had a lot of people accusing me of being an Iran regime sympathizer. But here's the thing, guys. 25 years ago, the West collectively was lied into invading sovereign nations in the Middle East based on the lie that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden had weapons of mass destruction that they planned to use against the West. We bought in. So when Alex was mentioning before about how you have to be willing to change your mind when you receive new information, guess what? Alex and I bought in hook, line and sinker on the weapons of mass destruction story. Because we were terrified, because if Afghani terrorists can hijack planes and fly them into buildings in the US, imagine what they would do with weapons of mass destruction, right? We were terrified, and when you make decisions through fear, you generally make the wrong decisions. So we bought in. Years later, when it came out that there never were any weapons of mass destruction, we changed our minds on that conflict, right? As rational people should do. So here's the thing. The justification for Israel's preemptive strike on Iran was that Israel was attacking their nuclear facilities and senior leadership of the Iranian National Guard, and the idea of cutting the head off the Iranian Defense Force. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has been at pains to say recently that Iran is weeks or months away from having a nuclear weapon. Now, just to give a little bit of background on this, Iran has had a nuclear program for decades.
Yeah.
For decades. Just as we do in Australia. Do you know what? Do you know that we have a nuclear reactor in Australia, listeners?
I think we have one, right?
We have one nuclear reactor. It's been in New South Wales for about 20 years, and it's used for scientific research. It's not used for creating nuclear weapons, right? But we have a nuclear reactor. It's in, I think it's called Wavell Heights in New South Wales. That could be wrong. Fact check me on that. But anyway, if you Google it, you'll find it. And it's used for... it's used in medicine. Basically, it's to create a certain type of medication. So we've got that. Iran has had that for decades too, because they use nuclear reactors for energy production. So essentially what Iran does, we all know Iran as having a lot of oil, right? That's where they get the majority of their money from. So what Iran tries to do is enrich uranium to then use in nuclear power plants so they can power themselves domestically with nuclear and sell their oil overseas. That's how Iran makes money. Pretty smart way to operate, really. Would love it if Australia did the same thing. All right? Yeah. We talk about our natural resources getting pillaged by overseas companies almost every week on this show. Iran's doing a better job than we are of selling their natural resources and making a pretty penny out of it. So, here's the thing. When Benjamin...
Well, hold on. There's more to that. There's more to that enriched uranium story. So, if you're just using it for power production, you essentially, the byproduct of nuclear power is what happens to the uranium.
Yep.
Okay. Now, you can actually use some of that as you're enriching that uranium. You can use it for things. So the medical use for it is about 6%. So if you go 6% enriched uranium,
yep.
you can use that for some medical procedures, which is probably what we're doing here in Australia.
Yep.
If you get that to 98%, you can make a nuclear weapon.
Yep.
Iran is at 60%.
Mm-hmm.
That's where this whole thing's coming from. They're saying they have the ability to create a nuclear weapon.
Correct. They do have the ability to create a nuclear weapon. However, Iran has never claimed to want a nuclear weapon. And this is where things get a little bit sticky. Because, have you ever heard of the nuclear non-proliferation?
Proliferation. I got him.
You got me.
I got
that
word. Yes.
The nuclear non-proliferation.
You know why? Because I didn't read it.
Oh yeah, probably. So there's a thing called the nuclear non-proliferation. Oh my god.
Proliferation, you idiot.
That word, treaty, which Iran is a signatory to. Do you know who is not a signatory to the non-proliferation treaty?
Who, Jason? I know.
Israel. So here's the thing. Post-World War II, when the US essentially ended the war by dropping a nuclear bomb, the only time a nuclear bomb has ever been dropped, so just as a data point, just to remember, guys, the only country to ever drop a nuke on anyone else was the US. It's the only person who's ever done it in history. After that, people collectively around the world decided that dropping nukes on each other was probably a bad idea. So they signed a thing called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Hey.
Got there. And many of the major countries are signatories to this. And essentially what that treaty said was, if your country already had nuclear weapons, you're allowed to keep those weapons, but you need to start working towards nuclear disarmament. Because we collectively as humanity decided that what happened in like Hiroshima was...
Nukes are bad and kind.
Yeah, it was so horrendous, it should never happen again. And we collectively as a world agreed to that. So the countries that already had nukes were allowed to keep their existing nukes, but needed to start moving towards disarmament. Countries that did not have nuclear warheads at that point in time were supposed to sign on to say that they would never produce nuclear warheads. And what Alex said before about the enrichment levels, that was all became part of the treaty. You could enrich to a certain level for power generation, medical usage, etc., but you could not go above a certain threshold. So Iran was a signatory to that agreement since the 70s. Now, they have been called out at one point in time because part of that agreement is regular weapons testing, right? There are supposed to be inspectors, independent inspectors who are allowed to enter, check your facilities to make sure that you're actually following the treaty. And Iran has been called out once before, I think it might have been back in the 90s maybe, where they had enriched slightly past what they were supposed to. But they signed an agreement at that point in time to allow those fuel rods to actually be removed, sent to France, because France was using them in their nuclear reactors as well, right? All sorted. Israel never signed on to this treaty. Israel has nuclear warheads that they're not supposed to have, because those warheads were produced after that treaty was signed, and they did not sign it. And because they're not a signatory to the treaty, guess what? That means there is no weapons testing in Israel, because they never signed an agreement to say that independent assessors could come in and assess their nuclear stockpile. So, getting back to that argument that we started the show with, Israel's justification for preemptive strikes on Iran was that Iran is a homicidal, theocratical regime, and if they ever get a nuclear weapon, they will drop it on Israel and America, and Israel is essentially doing the West a favour by doing this. Benjamin Netanyahu said again recently that Iran is weeks or months away from having a nuclear weapon. But Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying this for a long time.
30 years.
And I've brought the receipts. Can you bring up that clip, please, Alex? And I just want to remind people too, before we play this clip, it was Benjamin Netanyahu who testified. Can you pause that and go back to the start? It was Benjamin Netanyahu who testified in front of US Congress in the early 2000s, after September 11 happened, that said if the US government overthrows Saddam Hussein and removes him from Iraq, that it will have positive reverberations throughout the Middle East. And then the US toppled Saddam Hussein. And what has happened in Iraq ever since?
It's a failed state.
It's a failed state. And I also want to remind you too, because again, one of the other sales pitches that we keep receiving, they are sales pitches, is that the Iranian people don't agree with what the Ayatollah and the Iranian regime is doing, and they want democracy. That may very well be the case, because they are talking about regime change. So if we just take out the Ayatollah, then the people of Iran will be allowed to freely vote for whoever they want. Now, we've heard this before as well, in Afghanistan. And I just want to remind people, when the US and the West collectively invaded Afghanistan, it was being run by the Taliban, which were a designated terrorist organization. The US then occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. And recently, was it 2023? The US removed themselves from Afghanistan and handed the keys back to the Taliban. The Taliban is running Afghanistan now and is internationally recognized as the government of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So in 20 years, with 1 million dead Afghanis, or thereabouts, maybe more, maybe less, we don't know the official numbers, what happened? Afghanistan is worse than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Now, getting back to Benjamin Netanyahu, because I put a lot of the fault for all of these conflicts at his feet.
Yeah.
This is not a I hate Jew thing. I love Jews. Jews come up with some of the greatest comedies known to man. Right? Yeah. Larry David is one of my favourite human beings on the fucking planet. I'll never be called an anti-Semite, because when I look at people, and we talk about this on the show all the time, I don't look at people and go, what's your religion? What's your ethnicity? Like, I'm not one of these stupid lefties that looks at every single person through the guise of what their sex, their colour...
Whether they're oppressors or oppressed.
Yeah, right? I don't look at people that way. I just look at people as people. And I'm telling you right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is a liar, and he has had a history of lying to get what he wants, which is dragging the US into wars on his behalf. So I want you to play this clip, and for audio listeners, it starts out, so June 12, 2025 is his most recent statement, but some of these statements we'll try to, maybe we can pause it and we can say what the date was when he made these other statements. All right, so let's roll.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have...
So this is in 2018.
The wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran...
Pause, this is 2015.
...is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close.
This is 2012.
Close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing
This is 2006.
up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is 1996.
time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
If not
And that
stopped,
last clip was 1995. So Benjamin Netanyahu has been pulling the Iran is weeks away from a nuclear weapon for 20 years.
It's longer than 20 years, Jason.
1996.
Yeah.
Oh shit, it is too. Fuck, I'm old.
Yeah.
30 years.
That's 30 years.
30 years. He's been pulling the Iran might have a nuke soon story in front of US Congress for 30 fucking years. But this is the thing, right? This is how propaganda works. It's called manufacturing consent. There is a book written by a guy called Noam Chomsky, far left guy, right? But I agree with him on this. It's called manufacturing consent. So what are they trying to do? They are trying to manufacture the consent of the people of the West, the US, Australia, England, all of the allies, to allow Benjamin Netanyahu to get what he has always wanted, which is full destruction of Iran. And the problem is, I've seen the propaganda literally kick into motion over the past week. I threw it into the group chat. I'm so surprised about this, but Erin Molan, former Channel 9 sports reporter Erin Molan, she put a post up on X on the Friday of last week saying that she was stuck in Israel because they had closed down the airports because of the attacks. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, maybe she's just there for a holiday. I don't know, maybe she's doing some reporting, whatever. Every day since then... Now, for a start, I don't follow Erin Molan on X. But every day since then, I have seen Erin Molan posting, essentially, Israeli government propaganda.
Yeah.
And it's the same emotive sales pitches that we heard at the beginning of every major conflict that has ever kicked off. So one of the statements she keeps making is that there is no equivalence between what Israel's doing and what Iran's doing, because Israel surgically struck only nuclear sites and senior military representatives, whereas Iran bombed a hospital where a 7-year-old girl who was a leukemia patient was being treated. So you're hearing the emotional call to action. And the thing is, this is a psychological operation. It's called othering. We discussed othering during the pandemic because othering is what our government attempted to do to the unvaccinated. So what othering is this. Human beings generally are good people, and they will treat other human beings with the same level of care and respect and empathy as they wish to be treated. The vast majority of people will do that. But if you can convince human beings that another human being is not a human just like them, that they're actually an animal or a plague rat or a danger to you and your family, or they don't have the same values as you do, what is really interesting in our tribal brains, because you got to remember, our survival was dependent upon being able to do very violent things when the time called for it. It is in our psyche. So I was at an event yesterday, to give you an example, and they were doing a welcome to country, an indigenous welcome to country. And we all talk about welcome to country all the time, and it's this nice thing, and we're including indigenous people, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Do you know what welcome to country was? It was for an indigenous mob to allow another indigenous mob to pass through their land. And if they weren't welcomed onto country, guess what happened? They killed them.
Yeah.
That's what it was about. It was literally tribalism. It was, we will allow you to come through here, but if you don't get a welcome to country, you better not step foot on our land, or we'll murder you. That's what human beings have always been like. It's in our psyche, it's in our DNA. So during COVID, they tried to other the unvaccinated by blaming them for every outbreak, for anyone who died. They're the ones who's going to kill your grandma. They tried to make the unvaccinated seem subhuman. And for a lot of people, it worked, and they treated the unvaccinated as such. That was all the calls for, the unvaccinated shouldn't get medical care, let them die. We heard all that stuff. Yeah. It's an effective psychological technique. So what Erin Molan has literally been doing for the last week is pushing Israeli Defense Force propaganda of Israel is all above board, they're saving the West from an Iranian theocratical homicidal state who, if they get a nuclear weapon, they'll definitely drop it on Israel and America and the collective West. They'll absolutely drop a bomb.
But also, why can't we use the moral equivalency, like her argument that Israel used precision strikes?
Yep.
Well, but they didn't in Gaza.
No, they have leveled Gaza. They've killed 40,000 people. So, but again, this is where everyone has been twisting themselves into knots.
Pick and choose. Yeah, you pick and choose the thing that suits you at the time.
Let me give another example of this. And you and I both listened to this yesterday. The Ted Cruz interview with Tucker Carlson.
That's shocking.
Honestly, this is one of, I believe...
It reminds me of that Dave Chappelle skit that just let me
think. Yeah. But to me, this is one of the most important political interviews of my lifetime. I honestly believe that. It was an absolute fucking train wreck. An absolute train wreck. But if you want to get a feeling for how these key decision makers think in the US government, you need to listen to that interview. Because, okay, let me give you the best example. AIPAC.
Yeah.
The subject of AIPAC came up. So for people who don't know, AIPAC is a thing called the American Israeli Political Action Committee. It is a political entity. It's a lobbying group in the US. And senators like Thomas Massey talk about it all the time. Every single US politician in Congress has an AIPAC handler, because AIPAC donates money to all of their election campaigns. AIPAC gave Ted Cruz $500,000 for his last political campaign to get re-elected. For some reason, so there's a thing called FARA laws in the United States. It's Foreign Agent Registration something. Essentially, if you are an entity which lobbies on behalf of a foreign government, you have to register on this FARA registry, which basically says, it's out, open, transparent. I'm from a foreign nation. I am seeking to lobby in the best interest of my nation by speaking to these politicians, donating to these politicians, etc. So everything is transparent, everything's above board. And before you think that this is, a dodgy thing, look, it is a bit dodgy, but every country does it. The US is the most important country on the planet.
It's advertising, like it's an advertising campaign.
Of course, same as where you got like Albanese trying to come out going, well, I hope that if I talk to Trump, I'll get special dispensations on the tariffs. Every country that does business with the US,
and you should do it for your very best interest.
Absolutely agree. Every single country should be dealing with the US in their best interest. That's what sovereign nations are supposed to do. But for some reason, AIPAC is the only lobbying group that doesn't have to register on the FARA register. So they don't have to register themselves as a foreign agent. And listening to Ted Cruz twist himself into knots when he was trying to claim that AIPAC does not lobby Congress people in Israel's best interests because they're not Israeli, they're Americans that are just lobbying Congress because they want America to have a really strong friendship with Israel. But
then Tucker asked him, well, what do they do? He goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, where's the money from? I don't know.
I just take $500,000 from the last campaign. But
what do they want from you? I don't know.
And then all of a sudden, just weirdly enough, Ted Cruz starts calling Tucker an anti-Semite for asking questions about Israel. And he's like, I don't understand the obsession with Israel. I don't understand and earlier in the interview, Ted Cruz literally said, when I ran for Congress, I wanted to be the most pro-Israel congressman in the Congress. His goal of getting elected was to support Israel.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Is that the right term to use in this, which is a very religious debate?
If I gave you $500,000, would you say nice things about Israel?
Yeah. Israel, IDF, give us that money, son. I will switch in a heartbeat. You know what?
It's justified.
Yeah, Iran.
Preemptive strike.
Man, we just cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon.
Now, going back to the Iran thing, so there's been previous attacks on Iran unofficially by Israel and America. Anyone who's seen, there's a great documentary called 0 Days.
Yep.
And 0 Days talks about Stuxnet virus, which at the time was the largest virus. It essentially permeated every single computer system in the world. And all it was designed to do was to find the serial number of a pump that's used in the Iranian nuclear power facility and blow it up.
Yeah. And
they did it. And they think it's a state actor. Obviously, no one's taken claim for this, but the lines were so sophisticated, the lines of code were so sophisticated and perfect that it's not just some hacker that's done this. This is would take millions and millions of dollars worth of resource to put together.
Yeah.
So this has happened before, and that I think that was in the noughties that happened. But I guess for me, my feeling towards this feels like Iraq all over again.
Absolutely. It's weapons of mass destruction all over again.
The exact same rhetoric, the exact same emotion, the exact same talk, and I don't think it's going to stick this time. I think we're in a different place now.
I don't know, because the thing is...
It won't matter. No, let me say this. It won't matter. The government's still going to do it.
Yeah,
But what's different this time is the people on the ground won't like it. That's the difference.
Okay, but I think what you're going to see, just like during COVID, the people on the ground who don't like it are going to get censored online.
Potentially.
Right?
Yeah.
And remember, and this will, and we're going to keep discussing this, but this ties into the van hoax.
Yeah.
Literally, so think about this. Only a few months ago in Australia, The government pulled a false flag to manufacture our consent as the governed to bring in new laws which were specifically designed so that you could not criticize Israel.
Yeah.
And all those laws are brought in place so that Julian Grant, the Australian E-Safety Commissioner, now has laws to then go to the social media companies to say, hey, these posts violate these anti-hate speech laws because they criticize Israel, pull those posts down. So during COVID, a lot of the pro-vaxxers thought everyone agreed with them because the only stuff they saw in the internet's town square was pro-vax content.
Yeah.
But as people who were heavily censored during that period know, that wasn't the real world. Because the world was being curated for you to sell an agenda. And our country has literally used a false flag to put the laws in place so they can do that again. And
do you want to do that story now?
Well, no. I've just sent you through another clip because I want to remind people of the Wesley Clark 7. We played this on the show a few months ago. I want to play it again because it is extremely important. Because here's the other thing that I need to say. This is not all Israel.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that Israel just controls everyone in the US. No, the US controls Israel too. And it's not the President of the United States who's doing this stuff. This is the deep state. This is the military-industrial complex. They planned this stuff out for decades. And I want to remind people of the Wesley Clark 7, which I mentioned in that Instagram post. Play this clip. It's 2 minutes long.
10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So, pause that. Every single one of those countries on the list has been bombed by either the US or Israel since that time. The last country left on that list was Iran. You don't need to play anymore. This has been a plan by the US deep state intelligence agencies since 2001. They've wanted to do this. And it is the age-old reasons. Money, power, resources. That's what this is all about.
I actually don't think it is.
You can pull the holy war angle if you want to.
That's what I think. That's what I think it is. What do all those countries have in common?
Yeah, they're all Islamic nations.
Because does Somalia have resources?
Yeah, they all have resources, mate. Like Somalia probably has gold. It's gold, it's oil, it's gas. Like look at Gaza, right? We covered on the show months ago when the Israel invasion of Gaza started. There's plans on building a channel through Gaza, which the US wants to control.
They've got feldspar, gypsum, iron ore, copper, gold, kaolin, limestone, natural gas, quartz, silica sand, tantalum, tin, and uranium.
Yeah. Do you think that Western nations, which are moving towards renewables that need rare earth minerals, might want to control those?
Yeah.
And this is the thing, guys.
The only reason why I wonder is if it's the holy war thing is it seems to be the thing spoken about the least.
Yeah, look.
So for example, like, let me say this. We went to fight in Vietnam to fight communism.
Yep.
That's the only reason.
I think that they are the most effective sales pitches. And I'm telling you right now...
I don't think anyone's making that pitch.
No. But the thing is, you can. Like, it just bubbles under the surface. Because again, okay, look at anyone who criticizes Israel. Who are they criticizing? The Jews. They're all anti-Semites. So they... While not explicitly bringing it up as the sales pitch themselves, anyone who criticizes their activities immediately is labeled as anti-Jew. So that brings that, because it's a tribalism thing. It's the easiest sales pitch. But I'm telling you right now, every single one of these guys who sits in these back rooms and makes these decisions to do these programs, they are godless. They do not fear God. They believe they are God. So to them, it's not about religion. But when it comes to selling the programs, the religion is just a very easy tribalist thing to reach. Because remember, let's look at recent conflicts. Russia-Ukraine. Lindsey Graham let the cat out of the bag. Well, Ukraine's sitting on $4 trillion worth of precious minerals, and we can't let Russia share that with China. The cat was out of the bag 2 years after the conflict started. That was when he said that. But at the beginning, it was all, Ukraine is a pillar of democracy in the region. They're not. Like, Ukraine's one of our key allies in the region. They're not. They're not a part of NATO. What the fuck has NATO got to do with Ukraine? Nothing. Do you know what they've got to do with Ukraine? Resources, money, power, control. They wanted to have NATO on Putin's doorstep so they could essentially use it as a launching pad where you just start false flags. Oh, look, Ukraine's joined NATO. Oh, Russia blew up a hospital in Ukraine. Therefore, NATO Article 5 says that all NATO nations must go to war against Russia. That's what this was all about. It's the age-old things, which is what, and you know it is, because Putin asked to join NATO in the 90s. Like, Russia fought alongside the West to defeat Nazi Germany. They should have been natural allies since that point. But Putin asked to join NATO. Bill Clinton said no, because the deep state told him to say no, because the military-industrial complex needs a boogeyman out there in the world that they can leverage to keep the money flowing.
Speaking of, I've got a question for you.
Go.
How does this make you feel about Trump?
Very disappointed in what he's doing. And I think that this is something that I do believe that a lot of people on the right are showing that they are more rational actors, because a lot of people who are heavily in support of Trump being elected, like we were, are now coming out going, I disagree with a lot of the things that he is doing. Whereas a lot of the Democrats are blue no matter who, Trump's the devil, I don't care what Joe Biden and his family did, it's anyone but Trump. Again, it's interesting because... So I listened to Nancy Mace was on PBD podcast yesterday. Nancy Mace, I agree with on 90% of things. Nancy Mace is all in on Iran not having a nuclear weapon. And she said, I've been in a skiff. I've been briefed. I know the information. Yeah, okay, cool. Who's giving you the information? The same people who are going in the skiff to give Congress people information to get them to support going to war in Iran were the same people giving George Bush information in a skiff back in the early 2000s, and they invaded foreign nations based on false pretenses. So the problem is, this is what I believe is going to happen. Trump will feel justified in doing his support of Israel because the information that gets put in front of Trump will support that narrative. And he'll believe, as a rational human being, well, I've assessed all the information and it's the right thing to do. The other thing I do... Sorry, you brought up the religious thing before. The thing I do get concerned about with Trump is everyone knows that Trump is susceptible to flattery. And one of the most flattering things that has been said about Trump since his assassination attempt is that God saved him that day. And he was basically anointed by God to run the country. And you got a lot of Christians peddling that narrative. Yep. If he believes that, and a lot of people have said that he was never really a hardcore Christian beforehand, but since that happened, his faith has been increased since that date. If he thinks that he's a religious warrior, that could be a real problem.
Yeah.
And what I find so fascinating about all of this stuff is the blatant hypocrisy of the religious angles. Muslims are terrorists. The Iranians cannot have a nuclear weapon because their God tells them that if they bomb everyone who's not Islamic, if they destroy the infidels, that they will go to heaven and get the 72 virgins and blah, 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 blah. And they say Iran can't have nuclear weapons because their decisions are based off theocracy, their religion. And then Ted Cruz, when was asked by Tucker Carlson why the support of Israel, Ted Cruz literally said, because in Sunday school, I was taught that the Bible says that those who bless Israel will be blessed. And I think that we should be on the side of the blessing. They're theocrats too.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
And again, the Israelis, they are Jewish. And unfortunately, one of the reasons why Israel and Palestine have been in an argument for a long period of time is because they both believe that the Holy Land belongs to them. And that is a religious argument, and it always has been a religious argument, and it always will be a religious argument. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. The theocracies involved in this are probably a really big fucking problem.
I'm really disappointed in Trump. He said that he was going to end all the conflicts.
Yep.
None of them have ended.
No.
Okay, so how many days? We're 6 months in now to his presidency, and it's not been done.
Yep.
So that's a massive letdown.
Yep.
If this kicks off, then he's started one.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just like everyone else.
Yep.
And sure, could it be the deep state? Yeah, but he was our one hope the way he sold it to us is that he was the one hope to try and push back against the deep state.
Yep.
This just proves how strong they are.
And there was a lot of people out there who were red-pilled during COVID who were saying, don't fall for the Trump psyop because nothing's going to change. And a lot of people have been saying that it is his role as part of the grand scheme of things to usher in the technocratical control mechanisms like Palantir and full-on surveillance and all of those things. And he is doing a lot of those things, so maybe they were right too. But you're right, we were hopeful because of the rhetoric that was coming out that he would at least do some of these things which were going in the direction that we wanted. And look, he has done a lot of the cultural things he has, but the things that matter, like, hey, we're all anti-war, he's failed. He's completely failed.
And he literally did that speech over was he in Saudi? And he did that speech. It's like, we're not going to get involved in regime change. Like, that's not America's role. We're not going to do it anymore. Now, to be fair, up to this point, America's not in it. Okay? They're not.
But they're talking
technically,
about it.
But they are talking about it. So for Trump to prove that he's got any spine at all, he can't.
He can't. He has to.
Now, he can actually redeem himself in my eyes if he turns on Israel after. So let's say Israel does kick it off, and then he goes, "You're on your own, Israel. I don't support it. The American people don't support it.
Yeah.
You're absolutely on your own." That might redeem him somewhat in my eyes.
Can I say the most controversial thing that I was thinking about all week? Sure. So one of the big discussion points has been there's been talk of regime change in Iran, and the Iranian people are suffering under the Ayatollah. And look, I agree. I've never been to Iran. I've not seen stuff on the street. I don't really know.
I told you my Iranian Uber driver the other day left Iran. He said to me too. He goes, he left it because it was a shithole, and he hated the government there. But he also said it was too dangerous to live in Melbourne, which is why I moved to Brisbane.
Yeah, exactly. And look, as Douglas Murray would say, I've never been to Iran. So
did you hear someone talk about the moon?
Yeah.
Someone asked something about the moon. It's like, have you ever been to the moon?
He'll never live that down. But so it's hard to comment on stuff that's on the street. Now, from looking at it from a distance, do I think that the Iranian people have the freedom and lifestyles that they should enjoy? Absolutely not. However, I was thinking about this a lot during the week, because if you talk about regime change in Iran, this is the thing you need to understand. In the West, we always talk about trauma, because in the West we're really soft. And in the West, particularly white women in the West, go and talk to psychologists about their traumas that they experienced when they were children. Like that their parents didn't buy them the Barbie doll at 3 years old. Like that was traumatic for them. And that's the reason why they're losers as adults, because of the trauma they experienced from their parents. But in a very real sense, we always talk about the statement of hurt people, right? So they talk about it with child abuse all the time. A lot of people who are abused as a child, unfortunately, end up abusing children as they're older. Hurt people. And we understand that concept in the West. It gets talked about all the time. Then, when they talk about Iran, they talk as if the only reason why Iran is the way it is because of the leadership. But here's the problem. Every single Iranian was raised in that environment. That is their norm. So, number one, I'm not convinced at all, if you topple the Iranian regime, that the culture of the country will change. Because the culture of the country is the culture of the country. Because that's the normal for them.
Well, the argument that's been made, if you go back to the 1970s,
yep.
It looked like the West.
Yep, and the majority of those people are gone.
Yep.
And the majority of people who live in that country have never even experienced those
I
days.
don't think it's that controversial. I think a lot of people are making that statement.
Okay, let me keep fleshing it out though. Here's the next thing. A lot of people talk about how in Iran they constantly chant death to America and death to Israel. I get why.
Yeah.
If America bombed Australia regularly...
Dude, if Samoa was bombing Australia all the time, we'd be like, death to Samoa.
Happy Australia Day and death to Samoa, right?
Yeah.
It would not be a controversial statement. If your country has been attacked multiple times, you would be radicalised. And we talked, again, the West and the media and the government in Australia has been talking about right-wing radicalisation of Australians for the last 5 years, right? Because of COVID and, they're being radicalised. Think about it this way. 25 years ago, the West invaded the Middle East and bombed people and killed kids and killed adults and killed everyone. So if you were a child 25 years ago, all you experienced was the evil empire coming over and bombing you and killing your family members. Those people have grown up. They're 25, 30 now. They're having their own kids. The West is about to radicalise the next generation.
Yeah.
Because the West is going to go over, and these people who grew up in a time that watched their family members get blown apart, now their children are going to experience the exact same thing that we did. Do you think that they're going to like America after this, or Israel after this? I'd say probably not.
I remember reading a story years and years ago about kids in Iraq and Afghanistan hating sunny days because, they feared a blue sky. Because that's when the drones could fly over.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
That's so heavy. I don't have kids. But can you imagine, raising your children and it's no, you can't go out today. It's too nice outside.
Here's the thing, though, too. As a parent, and most parents who are listening to the show will understand this, particularly fathers, the evil thoughts that go through my mind of what I would do to someone who hurts my child is very real and very visceral.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced anything like these people have experienced. And that's the thing, Americans, they've never been bombed.
Yeah.
No American child has been blown up by...
Well, there was a couple of, I think there was a couple of hits that Obama did on American soil.
Yeah, and look, there's been terrorist attacks and stuff, and I'm not trying to make light of any of those things, but look at how the US responded to September 11, which we know is an inside job anyway, because 3,000 Americans died on that day. 40,000 people are dead in Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? Look what America did for 20 years using 3,000 dead Americans as justification. And now Israel's just murdered 40,000 people in Gaza. So do you think that the people of Palestine are going to want to reconcile with the Israelis? I'd say probably not. And here's the controversial statement that I'll say. There are many countries in the West who all have the same ideals. Australia, New Zealand, America, the UK, Canada. They all have shared ideals. So it's reasonable for them to all go, we're all different countries, and we all share the same ideals. So maybe people all throughout the world will share the same ideals as us, provided you provide them the conditions to share those ideals. Do you know what you have to thank for all of those countries I just named sharing ideals?
I know.
British colonialism.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. The Brits sailed around the world, took over countries, murdered people, and enforced their culture on the inhabitants of those countries, and occupied them for long enough that that culture became the norm. That's why they have shared ideals. So here's the thing. Unless, if you're talking about regime change in Iran and you want Iran to become a thriving democracy, unless the West plans on destroying every member of the Iranian government and the high-ranking military officials who will fight against them, and occupying that nation for 30, 40, 50 years, and forcing the Western culture on every single Iranian person until it becomes the norm, regime change will not work.
See, I have to disagree with you. So, and only just because I've just read a book that essentially spoke about British colonialism. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a forced thing. It was very much like what the Romans did.
Who wrote the book?
Have you been to the book?
Who wrote the book? What colour was the person who wrote the book?
He was Scottish.
Oh, so...
Neil Ferguson.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, gotcha.
Well, but don't you find it interesting how when you look back through history, the good guys always won?
No, it's not that. So the Romans, for example, the Romans didn't have to conquer most places by force. The Romans came in and said, hey, we'll build you all this cool shit.
Yeah, brought technology and similar to what China's trying to do with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Totally. But the British did that too. So the British went to Africa and they built cities, they built railways. Yep. They'd never had cities before. They didn't have railways before.
I'm not claiming that everything that the Brits did was a negative. Like, they brought a lot of benefit to the region.
No, let me contrast it. Let me contrast it. So the British went around the world and they built a whole stack of infrastructure. They showed people how to do stuff.
Yep.
The stuff that they enforced was stuff that they were... they went and occupied India. They didn't outlaw any of the Indian faiths.
Yeah.
The one thing that they wouldn't let you do is it was customary in India if your husband died and none of the family wanted to take on the wife's supposed to set herself on fire and kill herself.
Right.
And they're like, we're not
doing that anymore.
Yeah.
But I would argue that the Indian faiths are pretty chill. Apart from the wife burning.
but they did that all over the world.
Yeah.
So what America was incapable of doing, we keep on saying democracy. Mm-hmm. Well, they haven't brought anything to these countries. They didn't bring anything to Iraq, except the idea of democracy, which they clearly didn't like.
And fire and brimstone.
Instead of going and saying, well, we're going to build this beautiful city, like they haven't done it in Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So... what I'm saying is the British colonialism had a plan that worked quite well and benefited a lot of the people that were participants in it.
Yeah, but you listed off all of those countries that the US hasn't been able to do it in. I reckon that all that practice means they'll get it right this time.
Yeah, of course. Let's move on to the caravan story.
I just want to finish it, because you're right. If you really wanted to bring democracy and a better living standard to the Middle East, you would not be handling anything in this way. You would be reaching out to the Iranian leadership and saying this: we want to work with you as world citizens. We understand we have differences both in religion, in our way of life. We do not want to impose our way of life upon you. What we want to do is collectively as global citizens raise the living standards of every single person within it, so that we can all work towards the collective goals of having a peaceful world full of prosperity for all of us. But here's the reality. Just as every single other conflict has been started on false pretenses, at the end of the day, US hegemony depends on them being the strongest dog in the world and other countries remaining weak and easily conquerable, because then they can be abused for their natural resources. So the moral justification of liberating the Iranian people is a sales pitch that they have no intention on following through with.
For sure. Yeah.
Right?
History has shown that.
So this is just like those data points you said at the beginning, where you had your friend who you put the data in front of them and they still didn't want to agree with you. They want to do the thing anyway. America is going to do the thing anyway, and Israel along with them. But do not allow them to morally sell it to you based on false pretenses that they have no intention on going through with. That's the lesson. Let's go to the caravan story. Okay. So we covered on the show months ago, there was, to give you a bit of a reminder, there was the exploding Jew caravan in New South Wales. And we called it out as a false flag event right at the beginning. And we literally had an episode about it. We called it False Vans for Sale, with a van that says false flags are us on the side of it as the thumbnail. So we called
Great thumbnail.
Immediately after... So just I don't know if it'll tell you in the story, so just to give a bit of a preamble. The New South Wales Police knew about this on about the 20th of January. The media was not alerted to this until a week later. However, the New South Wales Police knew at that stage that it was a hoax. And yet, the media reporting was that there was a van full of explosives and a list of Jewish people where they were going to drive the van from house to house and blow the van up at every house. It was the dumbest shit we've ever heard.
Yeah.
But immediately after that news was reported, the week later, the New South Wales Parliament passed new hate speech laws, essentially rammed them through, essentially banning any criticism of Israel or Jewish people. It was specifically targeting around anti-Semitism. And as we all know, if you criticize an Israeli person for doing a bad thing, you're an anti-Semite. So every single criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu or Larry David is classed now as anti-Semitism in New South Wales. But this story has taken quite the turn because of the Honourable John Ruddock. John Ruddock is a libertarian politician from New South Wales who smelt bullshit just like we did at the start and is using the parliamentary process to try to expose that. So if you can scroll down, let's read this article from The Guardian. New South Wales political staffers could be arrested after failing to appear at Dural caravan inquiry. Committee seeking warrants for staff from Premier and Police Minister's offices, but they insist they had reasonable excuse or just cause not to attend. A parliamentary committee is seeking warrants for the arrest of 5 New South Wales government staffers who failed to appear and give evidence to an inquiry examining the Sydney caravan fake terrorism plot. The staffers, 3 from the office of Premier Chris Minns and 2 who work for the Police Minister Yasmin Catley, were summoned to appear before the inquiry on Friday. They did not attend. The staffers claimed, in a letter to the Upper House Committee Chair Independent MP Rod Roberts, that they had the, in quotes, reasonable excuse or just cause, end quote, required by law to not appear. The staff members argued they were proxies because Minns and Catley could not, as members of the lower house, be compelled to appear as witnesses. The inquiry, launched with the support of the Coalition, the Greens and the Crossbench MLCs, is examining the handling of information about the caravan plot amid concerns whether Parliament was misled before controversial laws aimed at curbing anti-Semitism were rushed through Parliament. In January, after it was announced that the caravan had been found in Dural, laden with explosives, Minns said it had the potential to be a mass casualty event. But in March, the Australian Federal Police revealed they believed it was a con job by organised crime figures seeking to divert police resources and influence prosecutions.
It's not that either.
It's not that either. That was the psyop to hide the psyop.
Yeah.
Minns has said he was...
Wait, who's psyoping who now? Is it my turn?
Yeah, and guys, that is one of the oldest manipulation tricks in the book, is you admit to a little thing to obscure the big thing in the back. Minns has said he was briefed early on that caravan plot could be something other than terrorism, as it's classically defined, and that no one line of inquiry was being ruled out by New South Wales Police. The Premier and the Police Minister refused to appear at the inquiry before the committee sought the appearance of their staffers. Friday's extraordinary decision to seek the arrest warrants could lead to the staffers being apprehended and brought before the committee to give evidence, but several steps have to be completed first. Roberts will meet with the President of the Legislative Council, Nationals MP Ben Franklin, on Friday afternoon to submit the committee's case. Under the Parliamentary Evidence Act, if the President is satisfied that the 5 staffers failed to appear without just cause or reasonable excuse, the matter will be referred to a judge of the Supreme Court. If the judge agrees, then warrants would be issued, the staffers arrested, and brought before the committee to give evidence. In quotes. This decision follows numerous attempts by the committee over several weeks to secure the attendance of these staff by invitation and ultimately by summons, Roberts said in a statement. The staffers summoned to appear include Minns Chief of Staff James Cullen and 2 of his Deputy Chiefs of Staff, Edward Ovadia and Sarah Michael. The Police Minister's Chief of Staff Ross Nielsen was also summoned, along with Catley's Deputy Chief of Staff Tilly South. The staffers' letters to Roberts released by the committee stated, "Our attendance before the Select Committee to give evidence would be at odds with the principles of ministerial accountability and comity between the Houses of Parliament." They pointed to an outstanding inquiry on parliamentary privilege and ethics, stating they suspected in light of recent events, it would consider whether compelling ministerial staff to give evidence infringed parliamentary privilege or offends principles of Australia's Westminster system of government. In these circumstances, and particularly while these...
Can we pause there for a second?
Yes,
Can we just pause there for a second? That is outrageous. So what you're saying is, we lied about a thing, and you now want to hold us accountable, but in holding us accountable, you're in contravention of what we think the Westminster system says, that we're supposed to be absolved from being able to lie to you.
Yeah, that's
how I read that.
That sums it up.
Yeah.
And can we just make the obvious point? If they had nothing to hide, would you not show at the inquiry?
Yeah.
So,
oh no, this is what the deal was. They told us this. And
just to give you another point in this similar vein, the COVAX trial study that we covered on the show a few weeks ago about the people in Queensland, 10,000 people who agreed to have their blood taken when pre-vaccination, post-vaccination, and it went for 2 years, and then before the information was going to get released, the Queensland government decided it would be a better idea just to shut the program down and not release the information, and now they plan on burning it. If it was good news, don't you think they'd release the information?
Yeah.
Right? So Alex's point is valid. These people who control our lives are allowed to lie to us to get what they want and then use parliamentary privilege or whatever bullshit they've written for themselves to try to protect them from things that if you tried to pull it as a citizen, you'd be in jail already.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's continue. In these circumstances...
No one's in jail for this van.
No one's in jail for the van. No one's in jail for when Dan Andrews made the call to get private security to run the hotel quarantine services that resulted in however many people who died, and he got to roll into an inquiry and answer, I do not recall, to every single question that was asked of him. Like, no one's in prison for that either.
Yeah.
Anyway, in quotes. Given your, Roberts, comments on Breakfast Radio yesterday as to the motivation for issuing the summonses, which make it clear we are proxies because our respective ministers cannot be compelled as witnesses to the Select Committee, we also consider that they have not been properly issued. The letter noted Ovadia had informed the committee he was on leave during the relevant period. Oh, I'm on leave, mate. I'm on leave. I'm washing my hair that day.
Was at lunch.
Yeah. Minns told reporters on Thursday that his staff would not appear. On Friday morning, Roberts conducted a roll call twice to empty chairs set out for the staffers before closing the hearing. Earlier in the week, the Premier told 2GB Radio he believed the inquiry was based on a, in quotes, giant conspiracy, end quote, led by his political opponents.
Yes, you're right. Your conspiracy.
Yeah, these laws are based on a giant conspiracy.
Yeah.
The shittest conspiracy ever. This is what's so embarrassing. It was bullshit. It was the worst false flag event in history, which is why immediately everyone knew it was bullshit. Yeah. They didn't even do a good job of it.
Yeah.
Asked if staffers were prepared to be arrested, Minns said, in quotes, well, I hope it doesn't get to that. I mean, I think that would be a giant overreach. A giant overreach, Alex. It's never happened before.
Do you know what else hasn't?
We lie all the time. It's never happened before.
I've never written shit notes about a terror plot that literally wouldn't work.
Yeah, and and
then passed a law to protect one specific group of people that was clearly set up by them, not by organised crime. Well, if they're calling feds,
the New South Wales Police Force, organised crime. Yeah,
organised crime. Yeah.
Well, hey, we did just see. And this is a horrible story, I don't know if you saw this, but you remember in COVID when the Victorian police, there was the guy, I think it was in a train station, there's that clip that went around the internet of a guy talking to police because he didn't have a mask on, and...
Got pulled back?
No.
Hit the back of his head?
No, the cop walks up behind him, lifts him up and literally slams him head first into the ground. You know, he just died. 31 years old.
Denied. And he got denied any, and there was no wrongdoing.
Yeah, because the Victorian Police Service investigated itself and found no wrongdoing. Even though you can see clear as day, he's not threatening police, and a cop comes up behind him. He's not even aware he's there. Picks him up and throws him headfirst into the ground. He just died.
He ragdolled because you could tell he wasn't ready for it. That's right. He's completely ragdolled. Yeah.
So he's dead now, and no one will be held to account. For not wearing a mask. That was what he was being questioned about. Not wearing a mask. in public.
Yeah. Yeah, 0.03% case to death rate of COVID, and 100% death rate of slamming someone's head to the ground.
That's right. If we had a pandemic of people getting their heads slammed into the concrete, I think you'd have a higher death rate.
Yeah, it seems like the Israel argument too. It's like the moral equivalency thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I preemptive struck him in the head.
That's right, because he didn't have a mask on. He was trying to kill all of us because he was going to give us all COVID, which we all would have recovered from quite easily.
Yeah.
So I spear tackled him headfirst in the ground, and now he's dead.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, R.I.P. to that man. He didn't deserve that, and his family didn't deserve that too. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Anyway, in this story, the New South Wales Liberal leader, Mark Speakman, was asked by reporters on Friday if the move was drastic. In quotes, "It is drastic, and it's easily avoidable if they do the right thing. Obey the law and appear," he said. Minns and Catley were contacted for comment and did not leave any.
You don't need to read anymore.
No.
That has made me so angry.
And rightfully so.
And Minns is a rat. He's a filthy rat.
Yep. He's pro-censorship. He's literally pro the regime. Like, when everyone talks about the World Economic Forum and all the bullshit that they spout about, he is pro all of it.
Yeah. But I heard him saying, like, oh, it's just like... Remember when he defended the law change? Like, so now the reporter asked him, so now that it was found that ban was a hoax, surely going to be repealing the law. It's like, what does that say to, like, the Jewish people? Like, we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them.
What, do you want Jewish people just to be abused? Is that what you want? Like, it was, again, it's irrational bullshit. But again, that's all you've got. It's just like that Ted Cruz interview. If you're trying to defend a clearly indefensible position, irrational bullshit is all you've got left.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, the truth does not mind being questioned. If these people had nothing to hide, you'd roll up to the inquiry and you'd go, hey, this is as we found these things out. We were told this by the police service. You know, they thought it was a credible threat, blah, 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 blah. You just go up, you rattle it off, and you walk home. You roll on with your day. Not appearing Streisand affects the whole thing.
But the wildest thing is that, so even this is essentially a diversion because the people that did this hoax aren't even on the rate. No one cares.
That's right.
No one's even going to look.
Who's the organised crime that pulled the hoax?
Well, they're criminals, right?
That's
so
right.
You're supposed to pursue criminals. So if it is organised crime, and the police know that it's organised crime, well, why aren't they investigating the criminals?
That's exactly right. That's exactly like when Tucker Carlson was asking Ted Cruz, because Israel and the US Congress is trying to say that Iran has had multiple assassins try to murder Donald Trump. And Tucker Carlson's like, okay, so who got arrested for this? Why isn't anyone in jail? Oh, well, you know, they didn't think that they were going to be, like, good enough to do it. And, like literally, they tried to just go, oh, yeah, they said they're going to kill Trump, so that's why we should attack Iran. Okay, cool. Well, where are the people? Why aren't they in prison? Oh, well, you know, like, they didn't think they were actually going to be able to do it, you know, because it was bullshit.
It's all bullshit.
I want to try to find some of this, and this is without notice, because I forgot what the group is called.
I wanted to try and find a video too, the video about the alien moon base with the monkeys on it. Did you share that on Instagram?
The alien moon base with the monkeys on it? No.
Yeah, so it's the US press conference releasing the pictures of the alien moon base.
Yeah, I did
and
share
then
that.
And they're like, oh yeah, there's a race of alien monkeys that's on there, and there's another one, we're releasing that too. And then the reporter puts his hand up, he goes, question, are we bombing Iran today? You got me.
Yeah. I'm trying to find...
What's that show called? I need to like download that entire series.
Yeah, I can't find it, which is quite funny that it's difficult to find. You know the Nazi cosplay group that gets together whenever the government wants to pass new laws in Victoria? They're all dressed in black and they all cover their faces, and then they've got that one dude at the front who always makes speech and like... This is theatre, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm telling you right now, there is no one in Australia who's a genuine Nazi. There just isn't. They don't exist.
Yeah.
And guess what? Even if they did, it's not like anyone listening to these fuckwits out the front of Parliament are going, oh, you know what? They've got some good ideas. I agree with them. Where do I sign up? But what was so funny recently, I can't find the news story, which is why you know it's a government psyop. Otherwise, they'll do nothing but talk about it.
I think I have it.
Oh, do you have it? Is it the one that happened after public service hours? when the staff were available to attend?
Well, no, this was the one. So he's gone to court because he had a belt on that was an ex-Nazi belt, but
that's a different story. That was a war vet who collected Nazi paraphernalia, who's like 90-something years old. They tried to put him in.
That's a different one.
Oh, it's a different one.
It's a different one. It's a young guy, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think he's a part of that group.
Oh, right. So he's part of the government cosplay Nazi crew.
Yeah.
So just to give you an example, because I don't think they've got a name in Australia, which is why it's frustrating, because you need to have a snappy name, you see? Like, you need to have something that the kids are really going to vibe with, see? Like the Patriot Front in America.
Yeah.
So the Patriot Front got rolled out all the time over the last 4 years under the Biden administration whenever they were trying to bring in censorship laws. The Patriot Front, for some reason, doesn't seem to be doing anything under Trump, because USAID no longer funds the Patriot Front. These apparently neo-Nazis in Australia who are so, like, devout in their beliefs of neo-Nazism that they never show their faces, and they're all, like, I'm telling you right now, good luck finding 20 fit blokes who aren't already in the military or the police force in Victoria. They're all a bunch of fat gay lefties, right? You don't find these people down there. And I can tell you right now, if they were like neo-Nazis or whatever, you wouldn't live in Victoria. It's the gayest place in Australia. They'd move. They'd come to Queensland.
Maybe that's what converts them, man.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I'd join the crew if I moved down to Victoria for 2 months.
On that note, I think it's actually a great time to buy property down in Melbourne, because it's a failed state at the moment. It will repair itself eventually. And it seems to be one of the few places in Australia that's going down in value. So if you're looking for a bargain, Melbourne might be the way to go.
Well, you
don't live there.
Yeah, you know why it's less popular is because you're not allowed to purchase machetes anymore.
Yes.
Did you also see?
You are allowed to murder people.
Yeah, and you are allowed to drive SUVs through shopping centres. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I saw your post. Yeah. Ban SUVs.
Yeah, time to ban SUVs.
Yeah, so dumb.
Anyway, folks, let's wrap it up. The lesson from the show is...
Don't fall for the psyop.
This is absolute psyop theatre 101. I just want to remind people, when October 7 happened, which was the justification for the invasion of Palestine, let's not forget... So, again, all we talk about at the moment is how technologically superior the Israeli armed forces are. They've got the best intelligence and the best equipment, blah, 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 blah. And somehow... a couple of dudes from Hamas managed to parachute over the border and murder people for 6 hours without the officials doing anything about it. And that was their justification to wipe out Palestine and kill 40,000 people. I think those are the latest numbers anyway. I don't know. There could be much more. But don't forget that at the time, what they told you that those Hamas people were doing is they were like cutting the heads off babies and all of these really horrendous, emotive things. And since then, that's come out to be bullshit. Now, let's go back to the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. What were the stories that we heard out about that? It was all about the heart of the Ukrainian people. You had the ghost of Kyiv, the Ukrainian fighter pilot who was so much better than everyone else. He was just shooting Russian planes out of the sky because they're like chosen by God to do these things. Ghost of Kyiv is bullshit. You had the story about the Ukrainians on that little island that the Russian warship rolled up to. And they were like, surrender now or perish. And they said, go fuck yourself. And then the Russians bombed all the people. Yeah, never happened. Like, human beings are narrative-driven creatures. We love a good story. That's why, as Alex covered on the show a few weeks ago, a lot of females, especially some of the people who listen to the show, have been reading those novels about fuck dragons and all that sort of stuff. We're narrative-driven creatures. And, hey, ladies, it does something to you, doesn't it? Yeah. Those fuck dragon stories, you like those stories.
Yeah, they're hot.
They're hot.
Yeah.
We're narrative-driven creatures. So here's the thing. Narratives are going to come at you thick and fast about the heinous acts that the Iranian regime is perpetrating on their own people and on the Israelis. And I would hazard a guess that in 3 to 5 years' time, we'll find out that the majority of those stories were bullshit.
Totally.
But they are used to manufacture your consent to support our governments getting involved in another attack on the Middle East. What's the fireworks, guys?
That old chestnut.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Stay safe, stay sane, and we will see you next week.